This is the second entry in my series of character analysis videos for characters in the Golden Idol series. Note that, as always with these videos, there will be spoilers, in this case for Rise of the Golden Idol, along with Case of the Golden Idol, and the DLCs released for both games so far. Plenty of people have pointed out that Rise of the Golden Idol is full of characters who fill the same roles as those in Case of the Golden Idol. Luke Brown is the loyal henchman like David Gorin. Eugene Marmet is the bumbling idiot who still succeeds, like Peter Batley. I'd like to analyze Rise's equivalent of Edmund Cloudsley and its main villain, Jack Nowak. From what I've seen people say, the idea that Jack Nowak is a villain might be a bit controversial. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go even further than that and say he is both more evil and more stupid than Edmund Cloudsley. He might not be as selfish, but his worldview is twisted and wrong in more fundamental ways than Edmund's. If that sounds hard to believe, then strap in and let's see if I can convince you. Jack Nowak is a scientist working for the company Olympus Pinnacle International Group, or OPIG. He briefly appears in Chapter 1, but chronologically his first appearance is in Chapter 3. He's part of a research team led by Dr. Marie Westlake, tasked with experimenting on Lemurian artifacts obtained by Tessa Navari after OPIG forcibly seized her research facility, which is called the Harmony Foundation. The research team eventually manages to reassemble these parts into a working universal transfer device. We don't know much about Jack's life before that point, but we do know that as a child he looked up to his uncle, Isaac Nowak. Isaac is a world-famous scientist and the founder of the International Knowledge Foundation, whose main purpose seems to be spreading knowledge across the world through various programs. The game doesn't show us much of Isaac's character, but Jack admires him greatly both as a scientist and a person. During his work for OPIG, Jack becomes frustrated with his subordinate position, hoping he'll be swapped around with Dr. Westlake. He also looks down on his teammate Eugene Marmet, who ends up getting demoted to janitorial duties for trying to mess with the device. However, after weeks of using the device to absorb heat from the surrounding air, Eugene is the one who discovers that it can also return that heat when he sets himself on fire. For this incredible discovery, Eugene is promoted to team leader. Naturally, Jack is infuriated by this, as he considers Eugene a bumbling idiot who deserves to be in charge even less than Dr. Westlake. Not long afterwards, the team discovers a much more dangerous power of the device than increasing heat, the ability to transfer memories between human brains. After a series of experiments that get at least 2 people killed, the research team gives the OPIG board a demonstration of the device. Eugene takes this opportunity to play a little prank on Tim Spender, his boss, and obtains a memory of Tim cheating on his wife. More importantly, the team accidentally discovers the device can send a single memory to an unlimited number of people over a live video broadcast. The board asks OPIG employees to submit ideas for how to use this power. This is our first glimpse into what Jack would do in a position of power. He suggests that they record a month of memories from a gifted student learning basic arithmetic and literacy skills, then broadcast the memories as part of a children's television program. This idea is where we first see the core principle of Jack's worldview. Knowledge has the highest utility for improving societal conditions. On a surface level, this might sound a lot better than Edmund Cloudsley's ideas about people needing to be virtuous and work hard towards undefined goals. But as we'll see, Jack is taking the same kind of philosophical shortcuts as Edmund, and it will lead him to far worse places than Edmund ever went. After Jack's idea is rejected, he decides to take matters into his own hands. He begins secretly taking the device, which is named the IDOL, to the docks in New Wells, where there's an encampment of homeless people. Jack experiments on them, transferring knowledge from himself to them in the hopes it will uplift them from homelessness by helping them get jobs. When this fails, Jack becomes frustrated, despairing in his powerlessness to change the world around him. Luckily for Jack, and unluckily for the entire human race, it's not long before Jack discovers the most dangerous power of the device, and possibly of any universal transfer device ever made. Auriel Toussaint, a professor of ancient Lemurian history and a consultant on the same research team as Jack, realizes he can use the device to recover memories recorded onto a Lemurian data disk from 800 BC. He arranges to meet with Aurelia Winston, a curator of a museum where the data disk is kept. Jack comes along to operate the device and transfers a month of memory from the disk to Auriel Toussaint. As it turns out, the disk contains an entire lifetime of memories from an ancient Lemurian sentinel named Echo Secunda. Auriel recounts Echo's final memories. and the lines seem to blur somewhat between Oriel and Echo's personalities. He then insists on having more memories transferred. For context, the length of memory transferred by the IDOL is determined by lenses which are inserted to reflect the light it shoots at the target. Therefore, Jack tries to increase the memory duration by layering the lenses on top of each other, thinking it will add their effects together. Instead, it multiplies them, and the consciousness of Oriel Toussaint is completely overwritten by that of Echo Secunda. Immediately afterwards, Echo Secunda panics, attacks a security guard, and runs away. When you're playing through the game, he acts as a red herring, with the player left to imagine he might be trying to take the device and conquer the world or something. However, the biggest threat to humanity at this point is actually Jack Nowak. Not long afterwards, the homeless people at the docks are attacked by a drug dealer named Elijah Sinclair. He injures one of them, Luke Brown, before Jack intervenes. Jack takes Luke away and uses the IDOL to absorb all of his memories, killing him in the process. He then gives the memories to Elijah Sinclair, effectively killing him and replacing him with Luke. Eternally grateful for being saved, Luke becomes Jack's loyal servant. Over the next few months, Jack uses the IDOL to transfer the minds of homeless people into the bodies of rich and powerful people. When this fails to change the world for the better, Jack becomes disillusioned. However, Eugene Marmet accidentally gives Jack the idea for his most horrific and diabolical plan yet. This idea is to make everyone a genius by using the device to transmit the consciousness of an extraordinarily intelligent person to millions of spectators via live broadcast. For the genius mind that he hopes will uplift humanity, Jack chooses his uncle, Isaac Nowak. Jack's opportunity to execute his master plan comes on the day that OPIG carries out the approved project, which is called the Happy Customer Project. The OPIG photo shoot that we see in Chapter 5 involves drugging swimsuit models to make them feel euphoric, then absorbing 1 minute of memories from them to broadcast via an advertisement for O-Range, an orange-flavored soda sold by OPIG. The commercial will be aired during the Live Pell Finals, a sporting event with tens of millions of spectators. With the help of Luke Brown, whose mind Jack transfers into a security guard named Bruce Myson, Jack's plan is to replace the 1-minute lens with all lenses, and the memories of drinking soda while on drugs with the entire consciousness of his uncle, which Jack has already stored on a memory disk, killing his uncle in the process. The first phase of the plan is successful, and the device arrives at the OPIG TV station, armed to kill everyone who sees this commercial. However, unbeknownst to Jack, Tim Spender has already set his own scheme in motion, though it has far lower stakes than Jack's. This scheme is intended as revenge on Eugene, and Tim traps Eugene on the roof of the TV station and leaves a message to taunt him. Without even realizing that Tim's plan has already been replaced by one with extinction-level stakes, Eugene heroically climbs to the top of the TV station's radio tower to unplug the cable, saving all of humanity. Meanwhile, Jack prepares himself to die as part of his plan, believing he has succeeded. While the consciousness of his uncle is beamed out from the device, Jack looks through the camera, sacrificing himself as a vessel for his uncle's genius. However, thanks to Eugene's valiant feat, no one besides Jack is affected, and a confused Isaac Nowak finds himself in his nephew's body, with no idea what is happening. So, that's the entire story of Jack Nowak across Rise of the Golden Idol. Now, I'll explain my reasoning for my claim at the beginning of the video, that Jack Nowak is both more evil and more stupid than Edmund Cloudsley, who already has both traits in great supply. Even though I don't think it's the most important factor in judging his morality, I want to briefly consider what the consequences might have been if Jack's master plan had actually succeeded. The game makes it clear that he would have effectively killed tens of millions of people, which is already horrifying, but in my opinion, it almost certainly would have gotten even worse from there. In a worst-case scenario, Jack's plan might eventually have led to the extinction of humanity. I won't go over the full details of what I imagine would happen or why, since I want to talk about all of that in a separate video. Suffice to say, it would spread paranoia, distrust, and violence across the world, with no clear path towards de-escalation. For this video, instead of focusing on the consequences of Jack's plan, I'll address his actual moral core. Unlike Edmund Cloudsley, Jack is capable of valuing the lives of others, and he seems to have a sincere, if very generic, desire for the world to get better. When one of his homeless servants overwrites the CEO of a textile company, Jack hopes that he will vote against the construction of new factories in the East over environmental and labor concerns. I think moments like that, combined with Jack sacrificing himself, make a lot of people who play the game view him as selfless, well-intentioned, or misguided. I completely disagree that these words sum up his morality accurately. First of all, despite the ways he consciously thinks about morality, Jack seems to lack an instinctive sense of empathy. In a genius parallel to Edmund looking on with mild interest while James Pair is burned alive, one of the first times we see Jack is when he watches Eugene setting himself on fire. Jack's immediate reaction isn't to show concern over Eugene's safety, but to marvel at the power of the device, just like Edmund did. At no point do we see Jack show any immediate specific concern for someone else based on their happiness. Instead, all of his priorities center around power. In his letter to Isaac, he wishes that he and Dr. Westlake would be swapped around, even though we've seen zero evidence that she is less competent than he is, or even that she's done anything bad to him. The thought that it might be unfair for her to be demoted doesn't even cross Jack's mind. Details like these are subtle and easy to miss, only acting as red flags in retrospect. I'll admit that until I figured out Jack was Hunter Wolf, I related to him a lot. Without revealing too much, Eugene Marmet reminds me a lot of someone I know in real life. This person is extraordinarily incompetent, yet constantly gets promoted for nepotistic reasons. Even the incoherent ad copy that Eugene writes, and desperately hoping that it won't get published, was a very familiar experience to me. The story of Jack's career at OPIG, taking on all of the responsibility of completing projects while powerless to prevent the harm caused by brain-dead management, is probably relatable to a lot of people. The anguish doesn't even come from thinking that you could do things better if you were in charge. It comes from knowing in your heart that anyone with half a brain cell could do better. Unfortunately, the real world doesn't always work like that. This relatability is why, when I first saw Jack's proposal for using the IDOL to educate children, it immediately felt extremely off to me. I was disappointed in Jack, and to my own surprise, I thought it compared unfavorably to the other proposals. For reference, Tim Spender's proposal was to maximize employee loyalty by spending a month increasing OPIG employees' obedience and skill levels, then transferring these memories to every OPIG employee. Meanwhile, Tessa's proposal is to meditate on the feeling of pure empathy for 1 minute, and have this memory broadcasted live on the evening news. There's also Eugene's proposal, which we don't see in writing, but which turns out to be the Happy Customer Project, an enhanced soda commercial. If I had to rank these proposals in terms of morality from best to worst, my list would be Tessa's proposal, Eugene's proposal, Jack's proposal, then Tim's proposal. It might surprise you that I have such a low opinion of Jack's proposal, so I'll elaborate. First, consider how 3 days of memory transfer affected Lavona Combs psychologically. She thought she was going insane and became extremely anxious and disoriented. We don't see how a month of dance practice affects Arthav Reddy's mind, but when Oriel receives a month of Echo Secunda's memories, the lines between their identities and desires already start to get blurry. While not nearly as harmful as Jack's ultimate plan, this would probably result in far more psychological damage to the children watching the broadcast than useful learning. There's also a subtle clue here. Just like Tim Spender, who essentially wants to brainwash employees into being more loyal, Jack's proposal involves transferring an entire month of memory. While Tim's proposal is more obviously evil, both of them reflect the same desire to make significant changes to people's brains, and assume they have the right to do so. You could argue that Tessa's proposal is based on the selfish assumption that she is more capable of empathy than anyone else they could find, which there isn't hard evidence for. However, she at least shows some remorse for killing Arthur Blythe, crying while she buries him. Her proposal also indicates the genuinely humble desire that people should receive a mere minute of memories, and treat one another better while still remaining exactly the same people they were before. Jack's proposal assumes that the vast majority of children watching need to have their brains fixed or improved. When he begins experimenting on homeless people, Jack truly starts to reveal his dark side. He begins with some restraint, telling himself that all memory transfers must be consensual. However, he shows his ego by assuming the only meaningful difference between his circumstances and those of the homeless is that he's smarter. He expects that transferring his own memories to people like Harry will be enough to get them employed and housed, and when this doesn't work, his only conclusion is that the other homeless people must have sabotaged Harry. In this way, Jack is just like Edmund. He assumes that people above him in society, like Eugene and Dr. Westlake, must have cheated their way above their station, while those below him must be there for intrinsic reasons like intelligence. Even though I think plenty of his actions up to this point are revealing, Jack's decision to start overwriting rich people's minds with those of his homeless servants is where he crosses a major line. The rich people in question are extremely unsympathetic, with at least one apparently paying to watch a snuff film. Even so, Jack mostly treats their immorality as an excuse for doing what he wants to do anyway. He also considers it a failure if the homeless people he transfers don't change the world in the ways he wants, with the improvement in their individual lives apparently being of no value to Jack in and of itself. Here we get to the reason that I say Jack is worse than Edmund. While Edmund is merely incapable of valuing anyone else's life as much as his own, Jack demonstrates that he has this capacity and still decides it's morally acceptable to end the lives of tens of millions of people in exchange for empowering just one person. You could even say Edmund is lacking in a specific kind of free will or understanding that Jack possesses, and that Jack is therefore more culpable for his actions. I would also say that while Edmund only values himself, Jack only values his own egotistical worldview, which he mentally separates from himself as a person. I don't know much about the real-life dharmic religious traditions that apparently inspired the ancient Lemurian religion in the Golden Idol series. But from what little I do understand, I can only imagine that Jack's actions would be considered especially heinous by their standards. If you believe in karma or reincarnation or any kind of balance between all the living, conscious beings that exist on Earth, then taking a single ego and inflating it 10 million times while extinguishing 10 million other minds must be an unprecedented abomination. It's possible that in the Golden Idol universe, the commission of this crime by Echo Secunda in ancient Lemuria heavily influenced the Lemurian religion to de-emphasize the importance of individuals' egos in favor of a universal consciousness, which acted as a stand-in for the vast diversity of human minds that make civilization possible. All of this explains why Jack Nowak is one sick bastard. It also leads me to why Jack Nowak is stupid. If you're not paying close attention, it's easy to mistake Jack for a smart person before his master plan is revealed, because he always seems calm and rational, just like Edmund Cloudsley. It also helps that he presumably has some kind of scientific education based on his job. Also, he wears a lab coat and glasses, which visually code him as a smart, sciencey guy. Finally, he says a lot of superficially smart-sounding things, like writing out the lens durations to a high level of accuracy, and talking about how the Happy Customer project needs a control group, and doing a lot of math on a calculator. The most over-the-top of these is the one about the control group. I'm not 100% sure what they're talking about in this scene. It's not the Happy Customer project because Tessa seems fine with it. However, because Eugene uses the name IDOL, we know that the initial memory experiments have already started. So Jack isn't talking about those. My best guess is that they're talking about some kind of mass broadcast, but haven't decided what yet. And Jack is just saying sciencey words to show off and hold Eugene back from being an absolute king. Anyway, as for why Jack's overall philosophy and worldview is stupid, I think this is shown pretty well by imagining if his final plan had succeeded. It's hard to picture what kind of bright future Jack imagined for humanity once his 10 million uncles were roaming around. Did he think his uncle's genius was some kind of magic that would let him invent miraculous technology out of nothing, like Tony Stark? Did he assume the jobs of dumb farmers and dumb cashiers and dumb politicians would be done at least twice as well by his smart special uncle, despite zero training in those fields? The most specific hope I can imagine Jack having is that Isaac would reinvent ancient Lemurian technology. But if Lemurian history is any guide, that would make the world worse, not better. Just like Edmund Cloudsley, Jack didn't have any concrete vision of how people's lives would actually be better in his ideal world, and didn't question how the Lemurian Empire collapsed while using the exact same technology he intended to use to achieve his vision. Jack and Edmund also share a fundamentally childish idea of what intelligence is, where it comes from, what it can do, and what it can't do. In this regard, Jack's hand-waving is even more egregious than Edmund's, with Edmund at least thinking up examples of behaviors that virtuous and non-virtuous people would do, arbitrary as they may be. When Jack says knowledge has the highest utility, he means that it's a magical property which solves problems through nebulous mechanics that he doesn't bother to prove or even understand. This might sound like a harsh summary, but you can see it play out in Jack's experiments. If someone is homeless and has no job, just make them more smarter, and they will have a job. If they still don't get a job, just replace someone evil and stupid with them, and their smart brain will make them do good, smart things. If they do evil, bad things, or fail to do good things, then you just need to do the whole thing again with someone even smarterer. Oh, and just to make sure it works, do it 10 million times. Don't worry about what specific domain of knowledge the smart person has, or what institutions made it possible for them to apply that knowledge to get results. Also, don't worry about what the results of this entire plan will be, because the smartest person will automatically think of the smartest results using their smart brain, and then those results will happen, and it'll be good. Hopefully, I've conveyed to you why Jack is exactly the kind of evil fool that the ancient Lemurians warned about in the recorded Spiel Dance message. His worldview is nonsense that wildly misapprehends how the real world works, and he has no compunctions about killing millions of people to achieve goals that he doesn't even care enough to define. He's like Edmund, but even more twisted and with even more childish ideas of what makes people worthy or unworthy. And finally, just like Edmund, he's thwarted by someone who is stupid in more obvious ways than himself, someone whom he thought was beneath him. This brings me to why Eugene Marmet is the greatest. Like I said before, Eugene reminds me a lot of someone I know, who likewise is very stupid and makes inexplicably bad decisions with disastrous consequences for everyone. However, I feel like watching Eugene's struggles gave me a new appreciation for that kind of person, because they all fundamentally are driven by the same thing, the desire to be liked. You could argue that Eugene is a power-hungry corporate climber and therefore not much of a hero. After all, he does go out of his way to sabotage Tim Spender, secretly swapping out the memory lenses to blackmail him. He also laughs maniacally about how no one can stop his rise to power, which comes off as quite villainous. However, I would argue that, unlike Jack's desire for power, which comes from a desire to reshape the world according to his vision, Eugene's desire for power is just an extension of his need to be liked. The more Eugene gets promoted, the more Nathan praises him, and the more important everyone thinks he is. Also, whatever his motivations, it's impossible to deny the heroism of Eugene climbing the broadcast tower in the finale. I'll never get over the fact that he decided to risk his life to prevent something several orders of magnitude less serious than what was actually happening. Eugene truly was O-Range's strongest soldier. He did it all for the big guy, and if you leave a comment that says otherwise, I won't read it. I feel like I've defended my claims about Jack pretty well in this video, but I've seen a surprising number of people online defend him or say he's misguided, so maybe what I've said here will be controversial. Fundamentally, the issue for me is that Jack not only feels entitled to judge people as worthy or unworthy of existence, but does so based on the minds that he thinks they should have. He takes it upon himself to optimize their minds for a magical quality which he never defines, nor does he define the goals it's supposed to achieve. He's yet another power-hungry character in the Golden Idol series, who thinks he can do better than the ancient Lemurians with their most dangerous technology, which destroyed their empire. I do want to clarify that I think Jack is an extremely well-written villain. He might be stupid and evil, but it comes out in subtle ways, and you really have to wrap your head around his worldview in order to understand just how much is wrong with him. Obviously, I'm confident that I'm right about my assessment of him, or I wouldn't have said it, but it speaks to the nuance of the game's writing that so many people interpret him so differently. If there's a moral to Rise of the Golden Idol, it's probably that there's no magical quality like intelligence that can just fix everything wrong with the world. Nor will there ever be some miraculous piece of technology that can do so just by being used in some really clever, careful way. Until we figure out how to actually live with each other and treat each other fairly, and dare I say it, with empathy, that kind of technology can only make things worse. To put the moral more succinctly, knowledge opens forbidden doors. Beware evil fools who steal keys. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed my video. I'm looking forward to all the controversy that I'm sure is going to come from it. It ended up being a little bit shorter than I thought it was going to be. I removed a lot of the scripts that I'm going to move to a what-if type of video that I'm going to make, because a lot of it revolved around what would happen if Jack's plan succeeded. So look forward to that. And with that, I will see you next time.